Hi, thanks for joining us. I'm Rachel Vinman, and this is the Suburban Women Problem. This week, we are so excited to be joined by Jen Psaki. She's the former White House press secretary. She's currently the host of Inside with Jen Psaki on MSNBC, and she's the author of a new book called Say More: Lessons from Work, the White House, and the World. Jen, thank you so much for joining us in the podcast.
Oh, I'm so thrilled to be here, and congratulations to all of you guys on all of your success with the podcast too. Such important conversations.
Thank you. That's very kind. Well, you worked for the Obama administration and then came back to work to the White House as press secretary for President Biden. Those years saw some pretty extreme changes in American politics. What was it like to see that all firsthand?
That's such a diplomatic way of putting it. I love it.
I mean, it's very diplomatic coming from me, actually. I feel like, what happened in that 4 years? I can't remember.
I know. Did anything happen? I remember so distinctly my last day of working for President Obama. I was there on the last day. I was there for the transition from Obama to Trump. And I was also there for the transition from Trump to Biden, which those moments told me a lot about what happened in our country. Because when we were departing, I remember very specifically Election Day, the day after, there's sort of this famous photo where I look extremely pissed off along with a number of people in the Rose Garden. And part of it was because after the election, I spent hours talking to members of my team and people in the building about how they worried this would impact them and their lives personally. And I mean, people who were Muslim, people who were LGBTQ, people who just worried, what does this mean for me and my family? People who were first generation immigrants. And I would say to everyone, we're going to figure this out. It's going to be okay. And it was much worse than I thought. I don't think I said it's going to be okay. I will say, because Josh Earnest is so wonderful. He was the press secretary at the time. I was the communications director. And I was sort of like emotional and crying and holding people's hands. And Josh was so calm because he's just a calm cat. I was not as calm. But we thought, well, maybe it's going to be okay. And it was much worse than what we thought was going to happen. I think it's safe to say, for a million reasons I'm sure we can discuss. Now, the transition when Biden was coming in was obviously the period of time when the plot to have fake electors, to plan an insurrection was all happening, right? It was all happening. In both cases, the Obama team and the Biden team was just trying to transition government, right? We had strong disagreements, that's putting it diplomatically and mildly, with the policies of the incoming and the outgoing president and many of his team. Our objective was to have a peaceful transfer of power in both cases. That is not what theirs was. So yes, during that time, I was on the outside, obviously. I was a contributor at CNN. I was working at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, working on global issues. It was just hard to watch as a human, as an American, as somebody who cares about our country. I don't even mean as a partisan. Yes, I've worked in democratic politics for years, but it is much, much bigger than that. Friends of mine, colleagues who felt under threat because of what was happening. That's kind of how it felt.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. And I think about this from so many different perspectives. But one of the perspectives I think about this is from the perspective of a mom. So I think we are all moms here. And like many of us, you've had to answer some very difficult questions about what's going on in the world to your kids. And so how has your parenting and your politics kind of influenced each other?
Yeah, I mean, my kids are now 5 and 8. So they were extremely young when my daughter was 18 months old when Trump was elected. My son was born during the Trump administration, which I'm always like, I'm sorry about that, my friend. There were many other better choices. But I'm a believer that you do have to meet people where they are, and that includes kids. But it doesn't mean that you need to guard them from any conversations. And, my daughter's 8.5. She's a massive reader, which I'm hugely grateful for. She is aware of the world around her. She will ask me questions. And I try to meet her where she is, right? And I tell this story in my book, but about one night during the early days of the, Putin and Russia's invasion of Ukraine, when she said to me, "Mommy, how do wars start?" And it's like, how do you answer that for a 6-year-old, And it's not in my view to say, don't worry about that, sweetheart. Let's talk about unicorns. Because listen, wars are part of what happens in the world. And I don't want to scare her, but I basically explained to her, sometimes people want other people's lands. Sometimes it's about religion. Sometimes it's about conflicts that are even bigger than that, and she said, okay. It's like, do you have any questions? So they do ask questions. My son he's 5 now, and he said to me maybe last year, mommy, or no, he didn't even say it to me, he said it to, I think, my sister, "Mommy and Donald Trump hate each other." And I said, well,
Kids are very observant.
Yes. And I said,
Indeed.
yes. And I said, buddy, we don't use the word hate. We don't hate anybody. I would say we have disagreements. I'm not sure Donald Trump spends a lot of time thinking about me, but I certainly have some thoughts about him. And that's how I explained it to her. My point is, they are aware of the politics that my husband and I share. We met in Democratic politics. We do not shove it in their faces. We do talk to them about our values and issues that we care about, and not in a like, we're supporting this candidate because they're a Democrat. I say, I support the Democrats because I think everybody should have access to health care. And I think we should treat people as everyone is equal. And we care about the people around us, including people who aren't as fortunate. That's why we're Democrats. There's more reasons than that, obviously, but like, I want them to understand in a way that's accessible to them. There's every now and then, it's funny, I remember a couple of weeks ago or months ago, maybe, somebody's like aunt or something was at the bus stop, and they just like really wanted to get into details about abortion rights with me.
Oh,
and I'm like, look, I have my views on abortion rights, obviously, but I'm like, I don't know, it's like 8:15 in the morning at the bus
Like,
stop.
I'm not ready to
This is the
people in
moment.
this manner
Yes,
right now, like on any subject,
yes.
let alone this
Yeah.
subject.
Yeah, exactly. But my kids are kind of aware of my political views, but they also are like, kids, they like take in some of it. And sometimes they just like, my daughter thinks the president makes good cookies, because it's like one time she came to the White House and they gave her cookies, and her friends think he makes good cookies. And like, that's part of her knowledge. He doesn't make the cookies, but like, it's okay. They do have good cookies at the White House.
Our neighbor, because we live in Florida now, and our neighbor Bubba will, like, sometimes before running by, or a couple times he stopped by, and he like has like questions about things he's seen on Fox that he wants to like quiz Alex about. But it's a cordial conversation, I will say. And Alex will like literally talk to anyone about anything. So he's like, come in, let's chat. I mean, I don't know. But it is possible to have a cordial conversation. I want to get back to something you were saying earlier about things changed, and you were interested in a peaceful transfer of power, which is a norm. But norms really kind of don't exist anymore. It feels a lot like we're the only people beholden to norms, and we're playing against people who don't want to follow rules. And how do you do that? Because it seems you don't want to not, like, first of all, you don't want to break any laws. Second, you don't want to betray your values. Yeah.
Certainly not.
You don't want to betray your values. You don't want to betray, like, if we lose that, we lose who America is in the process of getting America back, the United States back. We don't want to do that. So how do you play by the rules knowing that the other side isn't? You've always worked in communications, and I just find this to be a really difficult thing.
Well, I think the key here is not allowing people to normalize, right? And that is the thing. Look, I have my views on Social Security, on healthcare, on abortion rights, on climate. There are debates to be had out there. I respect that, even though I have my strong views. This is not that. And I think that's what's important to remind people of. And so there is not two sides of democracy, or two sides of like whether or not you should be supporting candidates who deny the outcome of the 2020 election. And to me, it is acknowledging there are disagreements on a range of policy issues. I have my views. Here's why. But also not allowing the, are we for democracy or against it, right? Are we for candidates who deny the rights of voters and the voices of voters from 2020, or against it? That's not, there's no two sides to that. And I think there's an important differentiation, which means, you know, and people have different views on this. Like, you know, I have Republicans on the show all the time who I have different views on a lot of issues with. I think that's healthy. I don't think, but I don't have people on who are going to deny the outcome of the election in 2020 or who are enablers of that, right? I think that's a pretty safe line, or a pretty good line to have. Now it's like, sometimes that means I have like people who are, you know, viewers don't love, and that's okay, because sometimes it's important to hear the viewpoints of people who come from a different background, a different take, especially if they're going to say, yeah, I disagree on the Iran nuclear deal, but this is not okay. And like, what is being advocated for now is not okay. And I do think those voices are important.
Good answer.
Yeah, I love that. I was going to kind of lead in speaking of people that people don't love. Um, recently, after the State of the Union, we saw Katie Britt pretty much play the stereotypical suburban mom.
Yeah.
So, you
Oh
know,
God. Is
in the
that the
kitchen,
I wish I could
like,
show you guys my
how-
kitchen
yeah,
right now, just
yeah,
because it's like, it's a
yeah,
freaking disaster. And her kitchen had no stuff in it. So maybe that's the
yeah.
key. If I just don't let anyone walk in there or have any things in it, I don't know, maybe we could learn that from her.
I
Right,
have
but
so many thoughts about this. Keep going.
it was stereotypical all the
All
way.
the way.
And then you have Steve Bannon and all of his apparent infinite wisdom saying that MAGA doesn't even need suburban women in the next election. And so I'm just curious to hear from you. I would love to hear your thoughts on that whole thing, but also just big picture, what role do you think suburban women are going to play in this upcoming election?
I mean, I'm just going to reverse here, because enormous. And I think suburban women, in the sense of not like progressive suburban women or independent or Republican suburban women care about good public schools, care about the safety of their kids in those schools. Every time there's a shooting, I feel freaked out about my kids. And I am not alone. They care about their own rights, about their own bodies. And again, this is not about democratic suburban women. This is about women who are working, not working, taking care of their families, trying to just get by, etc. Okay, let me get into the Katie Britt thing now, because I don't know Katie Britt. I have seen her speak publicly prior to this, and I thought she was pretty good generally, right? Just as a communications evaluator.
What happened?
I have no earthly clue who gave her that advice. She should never work with them again. First of all, suburban women are not just like sitting in the kitchen, like
I know, it's so
dinner.
so bad.
Sometimes, but like we do all sorts of things, suburban women. You know what I mean? Second is, it was like fire and brimstone from your kitchen, which is like, who is that appealing to? I don't even know. And I felt scared at moments during that speech. Now, again, I don't know her. What I find super offensive about this on her behalf is Katie Britt is a super accomplished person. I mean, she is like, she was a chief of staff to a well-respected member of the Senate when she was in her 30s. Like, not that has to be. All suburban women do different things. But it's like they muted over and minimized her own accomplishments. You don't have to agree with her to recognize that. And like tried to make her into this like weird, like, I'm thinking of like what like the Truman Show.
Yeah.
It's like
Yes.
you cut off her head. She's like got a machine in there, and it's like a fire and brimstone, AI generated scary suburban mom. That is not who suburban moms are, nor is it who she is.
Yeah.
She's a very accomplished, impressive woman who I don't agree with on every issue, but I feel like there was a massive disservice to her and whoever advised her to do the speech in the way she did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely 100% agree with that as a person sitting in my not kitchen, but my
Yeah.
very poorly actually undecorated office. But yes, like, suburban women, we are not just this one caricature that
Yes.
I
Mhm.
feel like they are trying to put forward. And I say that not to minimize the fact that there are suburban moms that are, stay-at-home moms,
Of
and
course
there are
there are.
probably suburban moms listening right now whose kitchens are immaculate. Like, I'm not taking away from that at all. But I do feel like the GOP tends to want to create this image of this is who women are or are supposed to be. And to your point, minimize all the accomplished things, like, all
Yes.
the different things that we actually really are out here doing, um, to play on the images and stereotypes of where women should be, which is, I mean, we're talking about a person who is actually in Congress, yet,
She's in
you
the
know,
Senate. I think she's younger
like
than I am.
women
I mean, it's
women
like,
belong in the kitchen. It's
you know,
weird. And it's a weird
yeah,
juxtaposition. I don't know.
yes, it's so weird. And like whether you're working or not working, every mom is more you being your kids. Listen, my kids are the greatest magical unicorn human beings in my life. That is true. I am, of course, much more than that. I have interests. I have books I like to read and shows I like to watch, a job whatever. We're all multifaceted humans, is the thing.
I do wish there was more conversation around recognizing that we
Yeah.
are more. And it's not just, I'm not only voting because of reproductive rights. I'm not only voting because of safety in school. Like that, I mean, maybe some people are, but that's not me. And it feels like just an oversimplification and not really recognizing the
Yes.
complexity of what goes into, you know, what I advocate for and what I want. So, I mean, speaking of lots of different things, tell us about your book. It sounds like it's very wide ranging. So it's very exciting. So
Oh,
tell us
thank
about it.
you. Yeah, it's called Say More, and it's really about lessons in communicating. And so I tell lots of stories about people that people will know, Barack Obama and Joe Biden, John Kerry, Rahm Emanuel. But each chapter is really meant to be a lesson, and something I've learned over the last 20 years. So it's like a book I wish I would have had when I was starting my career or in my 20s, if that makes sense. And what I've found, I don't know if this is true for both of you, my bet it is like I've learned more from the mistakes that I've made, or from the times I wish I would have spoken up, or from the things I wish I would have handled differently, than like, wow, that was a really successful big day, you know? And so I talk about a lot of that. I mean, everything from, again, what to do when you make a mistake, how to deal with bullies like the Kremlin, for example. I talk about that in there, how to deal with different kinds of bosses, which is important, how to take and seek feedback, which I took a long time to learn that. So it's all told through my experience and lots, again, of people that people know. But that's what it's about.
I love it. The Kremlin
Wow.
is really good about playing those head games. That's like
Yeah.
their
Yeah.
their thing. When we
Yeah.
lived there one day, I just spent all day in the winter in an apartment with a toddler, and I read that
Oh my God. God
Vladimir
bless
Putin
you.
kept
Yeah.
kept John Kerry waiting for like hours, and I was like, I
True.
could have just
I
sent
was
my
on that trip.
oh, were you? I was
Yeah.
like, I could have just sent my toddler over there. She speaks Russian. No
Yeah.
one's going to leave her waiting around, or they will pay for it. So I was
I
Yeah.
like,
mean,
I
seriously.
wish we would have
Maybe
connected. Then Jen, I really could have helped you with this.
you
Like,
could have taken your toddler. See, that
yeah,
would have been like
I
the
mean,
answer.
I really look forward to reading this. I think everyone can benefit from understanding that we learn the lessons when we go through the hardest times. And that
Yeah.
is just in raising a teenager. We have a teenager. Jasmine has two teenagers. It is really hard when you know they don't have that perspective of life. And then you also realize, oh no, but you get the perspective when it's the hard times and you don't want them to go through it, but you know they're going to. And it's true for us too. So it's not the end of the world.
Oh God. I feel like I can't. I mean, my kids are still little, and I just like, I'm already anticipating kind of like the mean girl stuff, and I know what will happen, and just like the not being invited to birthday party, whatever.
All the
things that will just happen.
It'll all happen.
So I'm really curious before we go, because I think that your book sounds like it has amazing advice on effective communication. And I feel like a big question that a lot of people have is like, how do I talk to my family and friends about politics?
Well, I would first, I mean, every scenario is different, but I would first say generally come to any conversation informed. And that means you need to read widely, inform yourself, become as educated on the issue that you know on the surface you're passionate about, but you should come to it with a depth of knowledge. The second thing I would say, and I talked about this a bit in the book, is listening is not just about talking at someone, right? It's not just about waiting for your chance to speak. It's about really being interactive about how you're engaging with another person. And that means being willing to hear an alternate point of view. It doesn't mean it's going to change your opinion. It doesn't mean you need to agree with them. It just means asking questions about why they think the way they think. Because often there's just not enough done of that, right? The third thing I would say, and I talk about this too in the book, but I learned this a lot from Barack Obama, is you need to not assume that people who have different points of view are going to attack you or not be unwilling to listen to you either, you know? And he, obviously he kind of like got on the scene, shall we say, from giving quite a speech at the 2004 convention. But I think part of the reason why he's elected is because he was somebody who, when he was running in Iowa during the Iowa caucus, he, as a Black man from Chicago, who was a constitutional law professor, went into people's living rooms and he listened to them and made them feel that he cared about what they had to say. And he did, and didn't assume that like a white farmer from rural Iowa was going to be unwilling to engage. And the last thing I would say is, you know, and this I learned from Joe Biden, is like, don't use fancy vernacular or Washington, D.C. terms when you're talking about issues, because you may think you sound smart, you sound snobby, and you're not welcoming people into the conversation. That's part of the more informed you are, the more you can speak in accessible language. And so that's the last piece I would say.
I love that. That is really great advice.
I love all of that advice. Yeah,
I do. I think my husband is really good at the latter because his came from an immigrant family, and his dad learned English when he was almost in his 50s, very intelligent man. Yeah. But it's important to meet people where they are and explain things. And also, if you can explain things and get people to understand a complex subject, you're really, you've kind of won in a lot of ways, because you've allowed them to understand something that other people have told them isn't accessible, or that they're incapable of understanding. And that's simply not true.
Right.
So
it builds
true.
trust.
Yes,
it builds
absolutely. Trust, well, this has been wonderful. It has been lovely talking to you about serious stuff. But before we let you go, we always want to ask our guests some rapid fire questions. So are you ready?
Oh, good. Okay. I know I talk a lot. I'll be rapid fire.
Okay.
All right. So you've had some pretty incredible guests on your show. We won't ask you to choose favorites. We would never do that to you. But who's one guest that really sticks with you?
I've had Jamie Raskin on the show a lot. But I did do a piece with him where we did a hike, and we talked about the period of time when he lost his son and he was still leading the effort to investigate January 6th. And it sticks with me. That sticks with me. I have a lot that stick with me, but that's one of them.
Understandably so. Well, America loves press secretaries, or they love to hate them. And I think a lot of that But I do think a lot of the love for press secretaries comes from the West Wing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a favorite character on the West Wing?
I mean, how could it not be CJ Craig? I mean, obviously. Okay. That's it.
Softball question.
So, what's the best advice that you have ever received?
You know, I talk about this in my book too, but Robert Gibbs, who was the first press secretary for Barack Obama, when I was got hired to kind of travel with Obama on his second campaign, I traveled with him on both, but I had like kind of a more senior role, and I was a little bit worried, like, will he listen to me? How will he take me seriously? He's known me since I was 27 or 28. And he was like, just act like you belong there. And at a certain point, everyone will believe you, including you. It sounds very simple, but it's stuck with me because, especially women, sometimes you don't believe. It's like imposter syndrome. You don't believe you deserve a seat at the table or in the conversation. And to some degree, at least initially, we're all faking it until we make it. I mean, you know, confidence wise. And that's stuck with me every time I kind of do something new.
I need that advice. I still try to, talk myself out of things. I'm like, maybe it's not the right time. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe someone else would be better. I have to stop doing that. So, advice I needed to hear today.
Well, where can listeners go to find out more about you and your work?
Well, certainly they can watch MSNBC and watch my show at noon on Sundays and 8 p.m. on Mondays. If they're interested in the book tour, I'm going to be all around the country. Say More book tour.
Oh, great.
Just Google it. All the details are there. I look forward to it, and we'll take lots of questions, sign lots of books. It'll be fun.
Love it.
Well, thank you for joining us today on the Suburban Women Problem.
It was a real pleasure. I appreciate you guys so much. Love your podcast.